Clay?
Well, I think the basic reason or symptom or proof for the racism of the Christian church is the simple fact that white people have pretended for so long that Jesus was white, and that they've had the necessity to interpret Jesus as being white, when essentially white Christianity is racially is historically false and theologically absurd, and practically, in terms of its effect on black people, it's a debasing institution that enslaves black people. I think we have to understand, though, that we're not making moral judgments here. Any institution that exists in any society exists to serve the interests of the people who set it up. And Christianity began as a black man's religion. It's an African religion. We have to remember that Israel went into Egypt with 70 people, and after approximately 750 years came out with over 2 million people, and hordes of other slaves who came out and became also part of the emerging new nation of Israel. So Israel, the biblical Israel, was a black nation, an African nation that came out of Africa and kept constant ties with Africa. And so we have to remember then that Jesus was a black Messiah, not a white Messiah, and he comes out of the whole historical background of Africa, of African traditions, of African history, of African culture, the concept of communalism, the concept of a chosen people, the concept of kingdom of God on earth. All these things were out of African tradition, not out of the white man's tradition. And Jesus was essentially a revolutionary Messiah who was trying to lead a black people in a revolt, in a struggle and conflict with a white Gentile oppressor. So the whole church has to be viewed from the point of view of the white oppressor. The white oppressor has one kind of Christianity, has one kind of church. The black church has to become independent and go back to the historic African roots of Christianity, because the slave church that the white man set up for black people tends to continue the enslavement of black people. So the black church has to become again a revolutionary instrument in the hands of black people, controlled by black people, fighting as Jesus fought for the liberation of black people against white Gentile oppression.
He came out of, if you look at his genetic tree, his genealogy, you will find that all of those people in there had been of the family of Hasmon, of the recent, I'd say about the last 10 or 12 of them, of his predecessors, of those he descended from, his ancestors. They were of the family of Hasmon. Hasmon was the great father out of which came the Maccabean family, which made a strike for freedom and got it from the Syrians, who were subjugating them at the time in the year 167 BCE under Judas Maccabeus and his brother John and several others. Judas Maccabeus meaning Judas the Hammer. There, and they struck for freedom and established them as an independent nation until the Romans came later and subjugated them there. When there was a fight between one member of the Hasmonean party and the other for power, then they called the Romans in to help, I think it was John Hyrcanus, come into power. It was either John Hyrcanus or Aristobulus. I forget which one it is. But anyway, one was called against the other, and when the Romans did come in and take control, then they took the power from him as well and gave it to a foreigner, an Idumean named Herod. So now, Jesus' family line in terms of as a dynasty was the Hasmonean dynasty at the time, and their symbol of their household was a panther, a black panther. Now, I got that from the writings of Sir Godfrey Higgins in the book Anacalypsis. And he seems to substantiate it very well, because this panther, Black Panther symbol went all the way back to ancient Greece. Bacchus, their god of wine and dance and singing, also had a black panther as his symbol. So it was a very popular symbol in the ancient world.
And we see Rastafari as a liberationist religion.
It is prophesied that oppression make the wise man mad. And who is madder than my servant? said the Lord our God, Rastafari.
The Rastafarian were the only true Afrocentric black people who preach self-reliance, who preach self-confidence.
But we interpret the Bible a different way. Most of these places that they're telling you about in the Bible is in Africa. The Garden of Eden is in Africa. The teaching that we get from the elders them is that we always have to look for a black man as God for we. Somebody that we can identify with.
Christ promised to mankind that he will return within 2,000 years. And then when he return, he will be the King of Kings through the lineage of King Solomon and King David. Now we look out there to see who is this. One man, Haile Selassie I the first.
Emperor Haile Selassie is the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. He's our God, Rasta God. Rasta said, the purpose of life is to be happy. Everybody's supposed to be happy and live in peace, love, and unity. Yeah, man.
October 9th.
Yes, sir.
That's where it starts.
Just like that. Yeah, baby, don't stop. Let's get drunk tonight. A little something for the 2001.
This groove takes me way back. So can I get this one? Dance, dance.
Chris and Prop Dog and Chris, you ain't never ever heard nothing like this. With a hump in your back like a Halloween pumpkin cat. Baby, damn, how you shake your ass like that? Krispy Kreme of the crop, looking so good, your collar got popped. Don't stop, get that shit. Let me holler at this chick, quick kick that shit.
Is it my turn to be concerned about the way the dance floor burn and turn you all out like Shern? I've come to terms with the fact that we've returned. Jelly roll, get butter, make the music churn. Round and round, she got more body than a perm. Down, 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 and slipping in and out like Lubriderm. Tag team by the CCQ. That's Chris Crawford Quick, bitch. We see you.
Dance, 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 dance.
So I want to talk about, excuse me, I want to talk about Black Jesus. And let's start with John Coltrane. John Coltrane isolated himself, went into his attic at his home and spent some time there. As far as I understand, he was trying to kick the habit of heroin. He was trying to create new music, and he needed to isolate himself, and he was trying to find God. And so he isolated himself, and he wrote his album, the album which is entitled A Love Supreme. He is quoted as saying, for the first time, I've received it all at once, like all of the music, all the message at once, because his intention was to serve God. He wanted to heal people and enlighten people. And so he felt that he had received the message from God on how to do that, how to go about doing that, and that it would be expressed in his, his opus, the A Love Supreme, because it represented his most intentional and sacred work, arguably. Most intentional and sacred work. And it basically follows the path of enlightenment from acknowledgement to resolution to pursuance and then to psalm. These are the titles of each, what we would call tracks today. But these are more than tracks. These are the steps toward enlightenment. I find it so interesting that he was isolated, that he had to isolate himself, and that he felt that he had received it all, received God's, message to him all at once. I find that interesting. And then I also find it interesting that A Love Supreme is his most intentional work. And to that point, it was stated in the documentary I watched that John Coltrane chose everything on that album. He chose the artwork, he chose the liner notes, and he chose the prayer. Like his fingerprints or his imprint is all over that particular album. The way that I learned about this album is I was listening to Dr. Cornel West. In many of his interviews, in his speaking engagements, you name it, Dr. Cornel West mentions A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. Or rather, Dr. Cornel West has mentioned John Coltrane many a times. These aspects of John Coltrane's life and career and his spiritual journey, I did not pick up from Dr. Cornel West. He didn't mention this. I don't recall in any of his presentation. Or you know what happens? I can listen. I'll listen to an interview, but if I'm not keen on what they're talking about, well, then things will go over my head. So I'm sure Dr. Cornel West mentioned it in his speaking engagements, interviews, and what have you. It just went over my head until I watched this documentary, which explained that there's a church in San Francisco, dedicated to the life, legacy, and to the sainthood of John Coltrane, which is like profound and wildly inspiring. And that's where I am today with this video. That's the jumping off point. John Coltrane, a jazz musician, a jazz artist in America, becomes a saint. And there's a church named after him. True, these are facts, okay? All right, so after discussing that, I want to move into this discussion about Black Jesus, all right? Because basically, John Coltrane, let's say, wow, must have been during the 50s or the 40s. I'm not, maybe the 50s, possibly the 60s. I don't know the time. I'm guessing it's the 60s. I'm going to guess. I'm just going to throw that out there. Probably the 60s for John Coltrane. Don't hold me to that, This is all new learning for me, new information. But we're going to start with John Coltrane, and he sets the tone for Black Jesus discussion, okay?
Mama, couldn't we at least let Black Jesus hang alongside?
Forget it. The only Jesus I know is him, and the one thing he don't need is a partner.
Mama, how do we know Jesus wasn't black? He could have been from the lost tribe of Israel. They were supposed to be black.
I bet they were. If ever people were lost, we're it.
Now just hush up, both of you. This picture has been in my family for as long as I can remember. When I was a baby, I don't know what I saw first. My mama, my papa, or this Jesus. Now, he's the one I know and love, so let's close the subject. Jesus was black, the Bible would have said so.
But it does say so.
What are you talking about?
I read about it. It's in Revelations chapter 1, verse 14. I read about it in Muhammad Speaks. It says, his hair is like wool, and his eyes are like flame of fire.
Well, Lord have mercy. It sure do say that, don't it?
And see, Mama, look at that hair, like wool, ain't it? And look at them eyes, red like fire.
Yeah, they sure is. Junior, how come you decided to paint this?
I don't know. All of a sudden, I just had divine thoughts on my mind.
And for JJ, that's a first.
What, having divine thoughts?
No, having a mind.
Next, I'm going to move into the 1970s, I believe, with Good Times, the TV show Good Times, starring, who was that? That's Esther Roll, Jimmy J.J. Walker, and I forgot the gentleman's name, the father. I forgot his name. Coming to America, and for all shame on me for not knowing his name, but it is what it is. All right. Now the thing about that TV show is there was the Black Jesus episode where James Evans' little son, the son, decides to enlighten his mother and tell her, "Hey, Jesus was black. So why don't we celebrate? Why don't we represent? Why don't we hang a painting, a painting of Black Jesus?" So there you have in media, in American media, we have we're having the media broach the subject of Black Jesus. Okay, we have that out there in good times, I believe, in the 1970s. Now,
Jesus was a human. If you're a Christian, you believe that he was the second son of the Blessed Trinity. He was the Son of God. He was divine, but he was expressed in his 33 years on earth as a human being. And now coming forward are not a few very, very active people to say that the presentation of a white Jesus down through history before people of color has served to characterize the Caucasian as superior, correct, as the best, correct, as better than others. Right. And more than that, has perpetuated a lie on the people of color and continued their enslavement.
That's right.
Here's who's here. Blair Underwood joins us from L.A. Law. Pow! Blair needs no lecture on this. A lot of black folks don't go for this Black Jesus at all. Been praying to a white Jesus all their lives. This is their Jesus. And no activist of the moment is going to come along and rip that imagery out of their soul. And they're just as proud of their blackness as anybody else. It doesn't have to do with all this psychological stuff that you newfangled people keep bringing on. Blair Underwood has produced it's misleading to call it a movie. It's a 30-minute short film. Yeah, 30-minute film in which he plays Jesus. Let me show you just a piece of that, Blair, and then we'll gab here a little bit. Jesus, this is the crucifixion. This is right at the beginning of the film. Just a moment to show you. Watch. Here is the beginning of the film, titled The Second Coming, which was written, produced, and as you see, starred in by Blair Underwood. You should also know, without giving the story of this film away, that the historical Jesus then appears in your film as a contemporary black male. Right. Who is in a mental institution, and they're scared to death of this guy. And, I mean, almost to the point where, they're just beating him down.
Let's fast forward 20 years ahead, or I mean, it's in the past, but 20 years from the 70s into the 1990s, and you have a well-respected, very dignified actor, Blair Underwood, who has a short film produced that tackles this subject. And Blair Underwood presents his short film entitled The Second Coming, about Jesus, in which Blair Underwood, a black man, portrays Jesus. And for that time, when that short film was produced, it was the very first depiction of Jesus as a black man. So that really, kind of stirred the pot. Or rather, when he went on Donahue, the talk show of the time to present his movie ideal, to discuss the subject matter in public, he was kind of stirring the pot, But so at that time in the 1990s, the subject was broached by Blair Underwood. All right.
Did the Rodney King thing inspire you?
Oh, most definitely. I've been very outspoken about things that I have dealt with the Los Angeles Police Department. Friends of mine, young African-American males with the so-called justice system. And when the Rodney King, the first verdict came out a year ago, it hit me. I said, it doesn't matter if you're a so-called celebrity. It doesn't matter if you're Rodney King. Even Christ, if he were a man of color, were to come back, he would be treated the same way. So in the film, that's why he's accused of this heinous crime without giving too much of it away. But I need to make the point before we get into this, because this can get very heated, as it has before.
Well, I don't know. We got a pretty thoughtful audience here. They will offer their own insightful, civilly structured commentary here in just a moment.
But it's important for people to realize that this film is not about dividing people. This audience has seen the film. It's about understanding. It's about enlightenment. It's about what this man, Jesus, whatever he looked like, what he taught, his philosophy of love. But we're dealing with this historical figure.
Yes, we are. What color was he, Blair? In your own, you are a Christian?
Yes, I am.
You were raised a Christian.
Yes.
And this is not an investigation, but I mean, was it you better get to church or Mama's going to have to know why? I don't know.
It was pretty much like that, yeah.
All right. So that you was it Baptist?
Baptist.
All right, so you sang all those hymns to Jesus, and I'm sure that Jesus, throughout your childhood, was white. Is that so?
That's correct, but we were always told that he was a man of color. Before we get into it, you have to understand what is black. What is blackness? Blackness is one of three things. It's either a perception, what you see. When you look at me, Phil, you see a man of a darker hue. It's either a state of mind, a consciousness. That's why I have friends of mine who are white, and you'll say, and they know more about African American heritage and culture than some black people. And you'll say, well, this white guy, he's black. He's a brother. Thirdly, when we talk about blackness, it's defined by your ancestral lineage, your genealogical line. If you go to the genealogical line of Jesus, there are people of color throughout his lineage completely. And the thing is, before anybody can take issue with this film or with this entire issue, and it's not a novel idea, the significance of this film is it's never been on camera. A black Jesus has never been on camera. Right. Certainly not a crucifixion. So it's been there. And it's important to establish that because of all the things you said. We talked about the justice system. Well, but once we get beyond that, then and only then it becomes irrelevant.
Yeah. I want to make sure I understand your position here, Blair. You do seem to be finessing a bit. That color is a matter of the heart. And you're right. There are white people who have been so very, very exemplary in their continued effort to ensure that the civil rights of all people are protected. Mm-hmm. That people of color, minorities, have started to refer to them as brother or sister. Mm-hmm. Great. Mm-hmm. But they're still white. I think you are suggesting that there's some pretty good historical anthropological evidence suggesting that Jesus just probably was black. Am I correctly stating your...
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
In that...
Was he a Jewish black guy?
There's no question. We're talking about a Jewish man from Jerusalem who more than likely, there were no camcorders or Polaroid cameras then, but more than likely had to have been a man of color. We're talking about probabilities.
Are you there?
And then, fast forward 30 years to an interview that I watched a few years ago. Well, it was 3 years ago now. And I was listening to Nikki Giovanni, poet, professor, scholar, African-American dignitary, if you will, and poet. Nikki Giovanni says something quite interesting in her interview with the Breakfast Club. And she says that,
and if Jesus were here right now, he'd be a rapper, but he'd be honest. He wouldn't be Ice Cube or some fool like that. But he would be a rap. He'd be Tupac.
Her interview with the Breakfast Club, and she says that if Jesus were alive today, he would be a rapper. A rapper. Which I think is interesting because my book entitled 109 is basically presenting that That premise is well, that is the premise, that is the underlying theme, that Jesus not only was a black man, but also Jesus was a rapper, specifically one Nipsey Hussle. That's about 109. And let's not get it twisted. As I read in the autobiography of Malcolm X last night, what was his buddy's name? Not Sonny. Was it Sonny? Malcolm X's buddy told him, he said, everything in this world is a hustle. He told him that everything in this world is a hustle. So I'm being transparent with you right now, saying I'm making these videos hoping to get my hustle on, hoping to garner and get your support for this project, my story, right? My story of 109. Get your copy at ic109.store. That's what this is all about, right? It's a fantastic, fascinating story. But Nikki Giovanni says if Jesus were alive today, he'd be a rapper. That's what she thought. Now, from her lived experience and from her perspective, that rapper would have been Tupac Shakur. But that's given her lived experiences, her, identifying with Tupac Shakur, or rather with her seeing Jesus, through him. What I'm saying in my book is that I see Jesus through, one Nipsey Hussle, right? All right. Now, next thing is, we're talking about rappers here, and then soon there'll be this movie released that Jay-Z is behind. Jay-Z, Hova, Jehovah. Okay, these are all his name, and refers to him as Jesus or as a God. The God MC. No, I think Rakim is the God MC. Jay-Z is Hova the God. But so Jay-Z is has produced this movie called The Book of Clarence, which basically presents Jesus as a black man, and what a time it is to be alive, to get all of these rich stories that are we're moving in this direction at this point in time.
It's he, Jesus of Nazareth. You can't even buy.
I've got my story. I've got my 2 cents to add to this. And Jay-Z, of course, he's a bigger name. Everyone knows Jay-Z. Jay-Z's got his story to tell. He's already telling it. Got the money behind it to just put it out there, Oh yeah, and then not to mention, speaking of right now, Christina Cleveland, Dr. Christina Cleveland is a young woman. She's younger than I am, a few years younger than I am, and she has written a book entitled God is a Black Woman. I have it over here on the shelf. And there she is talking about, she taught me this term, Black liberation theology.
Hi, I'm Dr. Christina Cleveland. I'm a social psychologist, a public theologian, and the author of God is a Black Woman.
And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what this is about. This is liberation. But you are free. You're free to believe what you want. Black liberation and theology. And when we're talking about the Bible, oh man, this is what it is. This is where we are. Now, the thing about it is we've always had our stories interpreted by other people. And these stories of interpretation from other people have left us, wanting, have left us, needing, something more. Basically, we've been left wanting, in want of images that look like us. Now we can go to Egypt and find those images of us, and that turns everything that we've learned on its head. Like, oh, Jesus was white? Nah, but look at all these black images on the hieroglyphs and on the walls of Egypt. Look at these statues and everything is black. How could Jesus have been black? I mean, how could Jesus have been white? Excuse me. Jesus was black, you know. All
At
right.
any rate, we're there. We're in the first gallery. Dr. Kramer, this little lady, you know, white lady, she says, and this is the Egyptian. The Egyptians believed that Ra, the sun god, and then we let her talk for a while. And here's a little picture, you know, you got one of the papyrus there, and they're talking about inhabiting the heavens, this kind of thing. And so as she's talking, we let her talk about 4 or 5 minutes. And she said, let's move on. I said, hold on, Dr. Kramer, could we stay here just for a second? She said, yes. You have questions? I said, no, I just want to check something. Now, I could read what it wrote, but I said, Shanice, what that say? Shanice starts translating the glyphs. I am the divine. When I happen, speech itself happen. This professor, Christine Kramer, one of the leading authorities in African art in the world, she's like, you can read that? Shanice never looked back at her. Yeah. And then and she said, and I'm not alone. She looked around and for the first time in the tour, she could see us. Going back to the Leslie Odom piece, we don't need you in this exhibit. We're very glad, and thank you for putting this catalog. It's very important. But please understand that what Jacob Carrellas used to teach us, African people must break the chain that link us to other people's ideas and talk to our ancestors without interpreters. In other words, Jacob Carrellas would say, you know, it's one thing if you got to read this in English, but once you understand what you're looking at, these other people can come. We want you to learn. But what we're not going to do is trust what you say about my mother. I'm going to talk to my mother without you. I don't need you as an interpreter. That's the same way. Go ahead. That's what I said.
Anyway, Dr. Greg Carr, you know, in his discussion with Karen Hunter, you know, sums it up exactly how I felt it. When he said that, I was like, yes, because I had been living my experiences very much in line with what Nipsey said.
See, the best teacher in life is your own experience. None of us know who we are until we fail.
Nipsey said, you know, who would you want to, I don't have it memorized. He said, something to the effect, who would you want to tell your story, somebody else or you? I know that's not exactly what Nipsey said. I'm going to have to find that quote and then put it, you know, right about here.
Well, who would you want to define you? Someone else or yourself? Whatever you do, homie, give your heart to it and stay strong.
Anyhow, I was living my life, and so there were those moments where I was frustrated hearing the stories from, you know, other white travelers. And rather than take their experiences and apply them to myself and live vicariously through them, I had to seek my own experiences to define the world for myself. I couldn't take their words for it. And so that really compelled me, motivated me to travel. And then lastly, I'll say that, you know, through my travels, I ended up in the desert. And it's so interesting that so many stories of the Bible took place in the desert. I did a quick search about biblical stories in the desert, and I found this. I found that the computer, AI, generated this statement. AI said, in scripture, the desert is a place of testing and transformation, of being divested of empire and ego. The silence and stillness of the desert allowed people to avoid the distractions and temptations of the world and focus on defeating their internal demons. You have to stop this, rewind that, listen to it again. That is profound because that silence is what I felt and found in the desert. I lived in the desert of Saudi Arabia for 2 years. I lived in the desert of Oman for about 7 months. John Coltrane's, you know, figurative desert was his attic, where the attic, where he went into the attic and he was, you know, no longer distracted. And so my story of 109, which is on sale at ic109.store, get your copy today. My story is about my experience in the desert. And it's so interesting that my story of being in the desert mirrors that of, you know, of Jesus's story. You see, Jesus had, after being baptized by John the Baptist, Jesus went into the Judean desert to fast for 40 days. And during that fasting, he was tempted by the devil. He refused each temptation, and thereafter the angels came to minister to him. Now, in my case, I wasn't fasting per se. I did live in the desert of Oman during Ramadan. So that's sort of my fasting, but I wasn't actually practicing. I was not fasting during Ramadan. No. Wasn't ready for that experience. But living through a Ramadan, being in an Islamic country during Ramadan was a new experience for me when I was in Oman. When I was in Saudi Arabia during Ramadan, I left the country and I went traveling. Anyhow, but it was Oman that held the most spiritual awakening for me. It was when in Oman that I received it all at once, like John Coltrane. But let's go back to this desert. Let's keep with the theme of the desert. Moses was in the desert for 40 years in the desert before God raised him up to lead Israel out of Egypt. So there's the desert again. Look at the role the desert plays in Moses's life. All right. And then for the Hebrews, God rescued the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt, led them to the desert of Sinai, where they traveled for 40 years toward the promised land. The desert. The desert represented a very important, aspect. And then finally, the story of David. David hid in the desert, hid from Saul, King Saul, before God made him the new king. Right? So before great transformation, before great change occurs, one has to go through that temptation that war with temptation, where we have to avoid the distractions, and we have to fast, and we have to divest from ego and empire. And that's what the desert represents, the separation from all of those temptations and distractions. And that's what my story of 109 is about. Or rather, that's where that story came from. It came from my time in the desert. So get a copy of my book, IC109. No, my web address where you can purchase the book is ic109.store. My YouTube channel is IC109. And the name of the story is 109 or 109 or 109. So that's what this is all about. So when I talk about the premise of the story 109 or 109, I'm not talking from a place of, I'm not talking from a crazy place. I mean, look at the people, look at the names of the people who have broached this same topic in their ways. I mean, maybe maybe my message and these words will only go as far as this YouTube channel, and who knows who will ever see this, but the same topic is broached in by other people at other times, and look at how far, they're able to take this same message of basically Jesus was black. Look at how far they can go. Jay-Z's got a movie coming out. John Coltrane has a church in San Francisco to this day. Blair Underwood has a short film, just something to think about. Peace and blessings. Black Jesus.
Look up across the street. It's high-speed tax service right now. That was the first Lawson T's. Right when we look up across the street, there's a big-ass for lease sign. That was it right there. That's what we had to do. That was God telling us that's what we need to do. We need to be in that lot. We need to pay some rent. Stop getting harassed by these police. That's the beginning of this shit.
Now, if he was a historic figure, he was black. Even Billy Graham said that Jesus could not have been white.
He was born in that part of the world that touches Africa and Asia and Europe. And Jesus was not a white man like me. Nor was he as black as some of you. We don't know what the color of his skin, but it must have been a dark color like the people of his day, because he was a man like them. Don't ever say it's a white man's religion or a black man's religion. It's a world religion. He belongs to the world.
Window seat surfing on the wing. As an adolescent, I dreamed of big things. Climb to the top of the mountain to see the scene. Petty whack, don't want me to have anything. I'm the captain, no jet lag. Boeing jet swag. Floating to the sunset, keep the drinks coming back. She summoned me, gave me turbulence on the sink. Pretty flight attendant boarding pass, I'm a buddy. Stunting first class, vegan meal yummy. Right.